The morning alarm buzzed through the mining colony on Kepler 442c at exactly 600 hours, just like every other day for the past 3 years. Jiho Park rolled out of his narrow bunk and stretched his back, feeling the familiar ache from sleeping on a mattress that was probably older than some of the miners. He pulled on his standard-issue gray jumpsuit and walked to the small window of his quarters. Outside, the alien landscape looked peaceful enough. The purple-tinged sky stretched over rolling hills of crystalline rock formations that sparkled in the light of the system's twin suns. 3 massive mining rigs worked steadily in the distance, their mechanical arms digging deep into the planet's crust to extract the rare minerals that made this whole operation profitable. Jiho had been the chief operations officer of Hanbit, industry's frontier division, for 5 years now. At 34, he was younger than most people in his position, but he had earned his rank through a combination of smart decisions and the ability to keep mining operations running smoothly, even when everything seemed to go wrong. And on frontier worlds like this one, things went wrong a lot. He walked down the corridor toward the main operations center, nodding to the early shift workers who were already heading to their stations. The colony housed about 200 people, mostly miners and technicians, along with a small security team and support staff. They were about as far from Earth as humans had ever established a permanent settlement, which meant they were pretty much on their own if anything serious happened. Nari Kim was already at her station when Jiho entered the operations center. At 28, she was the best mining engineer he had ever worked with, and probably the smartest person on the entire planet. She looked up from her screen, showing the status of all 3 mining rigs. "Morning, boss," she said, taking a sip from her coffee mug. "Rig 3 is running a bit hot again, but nothing we can't handle. Should have the daily quota filled by 1,500 hours. "Good," Jiho replied, settling into his chair at the central command station. "Any word from the supply ship?" "Still. On schedule for next week. Though I still think we should ask for better coffee in the next shipment." Jiho was about to respond when Su-Yan Choi's voice came over the intercom from the communications center. "Jiho, you need to see this. We're getting some strange readings on the long-range sensors." Jiho and Nari exchanged glances. Strange readings usually meant equipment problems, which usually meant delays and lost profits. They walked quickly to the communications center where Su-Yan was staring at her screens with a worried expression. "What kind of strange?" Jiho asked. Su-Yan pointed at the display. "Large objects approaching from the outer system. Really large. And they're moving too fast to be asteroids or debris." Nari leaned over Su-Yan's shoulder to look at the data. "How large are we talking?" "Each one is about the size of a city, and there are 12 of them." Jiho felt a cold knot form in his stomach. In all his years working on frontier worlds, he had never encountered alien technology, but every human in space knew the stories. Most alien species were either too advanced to bother with humans or too primitive to be a threat. But there were a few exceptions, and those exceptions were the stuff of nightmares. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "At their current speed, about 6 hours." Jiho nodded and tried to keep his voice calm. "Get me Donghyun Lee. Full security alert, but keep it quiet. No need to panic, everyone, until we know what we're dealing with." Donghyun arrived in the communications center within minutes. The security chief was 42 years old and had served in the Earth Defense Force before taking this job. He was the kind of man who stayed calm in dangerous situations, which made him perfect for frontier work. 12 large ships, you said?" Donghyun asked, studying the sensor data. "That's right. Any ideas?" Donghyun was quiet for a moment. "Could be traders, could be explorers, could be pirates, though pirates usually don't travel in groups that large." Or, Jiho prompted, or it could be the Vorthak. Everyone in the room went quiet. The Vorthak Collective was one of the most feared alien empires in known space. They had a simple philosophy when it came to other species: join us or die. They traveled from system to system, using advanced technology to force entire civilizations into their hive mind collective. Once assimilated, the victims became part of the Vorthak, their individual personalities and cultures lost forever. "Are you sure?" Suyon asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dongyun shook his head. "I'm not sure of anything. But the size and formation of those ships matches reports from other worlds that have been visited by them." Jiho closed his eyes and tried to think. Standard protocol for a Vorthak encounter was simple: run. Get everyone off the planet as fast as possible and hope the aliens didn't bother to chase down a few fleeing ships. But their transport ships were designed for cargo, not speed. They would never outrun Vorthak vessels. "How long would it take to evacuate the colony?" he asked. "With our current ships? 12 hours. Maybe 14 if we push it," Donghyun replied. "And they'll be here in 6. That's the situation." Jiho opened his eyes and looked around the room. Nari was studying the sensor readings with intense concentration. Suyon was already working on emergency communication protocols. Dongyun stood ready to implement whatever plan Jiho decided on. These people trusted him to make the right decision. 200 lives depended on what he said next. The smart choice was obvious: start the evacuation immediately and hope they could get at least some people away before the aliens arrived. But Jiho had not gotten to his position by always making the smart choice. Sometimes you had to take risks, sometimes you had to try something completely unexpected. "Suyon, open a communication channel on all frequencies, full power. To the approaching ships?" "That's right." Dongyun stepped forward. "Jiho, that might not be wise. If they are Vorthak, communicating with them will just confirm that there are intelligent beings here worth assimilating. They probably already know we're here. Our mining operations aren't exactly subtle." Jiho sat down at the communication station. "Besides, I have an idea." "What kind of idea?" Nari asked. "The kind that's either brilliant or completely insane." "Suyon, are we connected?" "Channel open. You're broadcasting on all frequencies." Jiho took a deep breath. "Attention approaching vessels. This is Jiho Park, Chief Operations Officer of Hanbit Industries, Kepler 442C Mining Division. We've detected your approach and would like to extend a formal welcome to our facility. If you're interested in establishing diplomatic or commercial contact, we would be happy to arrange a meeting at your convenience." He released the communication button and sat back. "Now we wait." "Commercial contact?" Dongyun asked. "With the Vorthak?" "You said they might not be Vorthak. And even if they are, they've never encountered humans before. They don't know how we think or how we operate. That might give us an advantage." "What kind of advantage?" Before Jiho could answer, Suyon held up her hand. "We're getting a response." The voice that came through the speakers was unlike anything any of them had ever heard. It was deep and resonant, but somehow mechanical, as if multiple voices were speaking in perfect unison. "Human settlement. We are the Vorthak Collective. We have come to bring you into unity with our great purpose. Prepare for assimilation. Resistance is futile." The communication ended, leaving the room in silence. "Well," Nari said finally, "at least we know what we're dealing with." Jiho nodded and opened the channel again. Vorthak Collective, this is Jiho Park again. Thank you for your message. However, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. Before we proceed with any integration process, I'd like to request a formal meeting to discuss terms and conditions. As representatives of Hanbit Industries, we have certain corporate protocols that must be followed. Another pause. Longer this time. Corporate protocols? The voice sounded puzzled, which was strange for a hive mind. That's correct. Any major business decision requires proper documentation, risk assessment, and approval from our board of directors. I'm sure you understand. We wouldn't want to proceed with such an important partnership without proper due diligence. This time, the pause was even longer. Jiho could imagine the confusion among the aliens as they tried to process his response. They were probably used to fear, desperation, maybe defiance. But bureaucratic procedure? That was something new. Finally, the voice returned. Partnership? Of course. From your initial message, it sounds like you're interested in some form of corporate merger or acquisition. These things take time to do properly. I'd be happy to prepare a presentation outlining the benefits of our current operation and how it might fit into your organization's long-term strategic goals. The silence stretched on for almost a full minute. Then, we will discuss this. Prepare for our arrival. The communication ended. Dongyun stared at Jiho in amazement. Did you just turn a Vorthak invasion into a business meeting? That's the plan. This is insane. Probably. But it bought us time, and time is what we need right now. Jiho stood up and walked to the center of the room. Nari, I need you to put together a presentation about our mining operation. Efficiency statistics, profit margins, resource extraction rates, everything. Make it look as professional as possible. You're serious about this? Dead serious. Suyon, start putting together profiles of our workforce. Education levels, skill sets, productivity ratings, make us look valuable. Valuable how? As employees, not as victims. If we can convince them that we're more useful as partners than as assimilated drones, we might have a chance. Dongyun shook his head. Even if this works, even if you can, somehow talk them out of assimilating us, what then? They're still the Vorthak. They'll move on to the next world and the next group of victims. Jiho smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Then I guess we'll have to convince them that there's a better way to do business. The next few hours would determine whether Jiho Park was a genius or a madman. But one thing was certain. The galaxy was about to witness the strangest first contact in recorded history. The Vorthak ships descended from the purple sky like dark clouds, their massive hulls blocking out the twin suns and casting deep shadows across the mining colony. Each vessel was the size of a small city, covered in strange, organic-looking armor that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. They settled onto the crystalline plains surrounding the human settlement with surprising gentleness, their landing creating small earthquakes that rattled the windows of every building in the colony. Jiho stood at the main window of the operations center, watching as a smaller craft detached itself from the largest Vorthak ship. His heart was beating fast, but he forced himself to appear calm. Behind him, the rest of his team worked frantically to prepare for what might be the most important business meeting in human history. Nari had spent the last 4 hours creating a presentation that would make any corporate executive proud. Charts showing mining efficiency, graphs displaying profit margins, and detailed breakdowns of resource extraction rates filled her computer screen. She had even included a competitive analysis comparing their operation to other mining companies in human space. "This is completely insane," she muttered, adding another slide about worker productivity. "I'm making a PowerPoint presentation for aliens who want to assimilate us." "How's it looking?" Jiho asked, not taking his eyes off the approaching alien craft. "Professional. Very professional. If they don't kill us, we might actually get a promotion out of this." Suyeon was busy at her station, putting together personnel files for every person in the colony. She had organized them by department, skill level, and years of experience. The files read like job applications rather than victim profiles. "I've got everyone cataloged," she reported. 207 people total. 43 with advanced degrees, 67 with specialized technical training, and 97 with over 5 years of experience in their fields. Good. Make sure you emphasize the training costs. We need them to see our people as valuable investments, not just raw material for their collective. Dongyun was coordinating with his security team, but their instructions were unlike any they had ever received. Instead of preparing for combat, they were setting up a conference room in the main administration building. Tables, chairs, and even a coffee machine had been arranged to create the most professional meeting space possible. "I've got 3 of my best people ready to act as security for the meeting," Dongyun reported. "But they're wearing dress uniforms instead of combat gear. I have to say this is the strangest battle preparation I've ever done." "It's not a battle," Jiho reminded him. "It's a negotiation." The alien craft landed in the open area between the administration building and the main gate. It was smaller than the motherships, but still impressive, shaped like a teardrop made of the same organic-looking material. A section of its hull simply dissolved, revealing an opening large enough for several beings to walk through. The first Vorthak to emerge was clearly their leader. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, with gray skin that had a metallic sheen, and 4 arms that ended in hands with too many fingers. Its head was elongated, with large black eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. It wore what? Might have been clothing or might have been part of its skin. A dark material that covered most of its body but left the arms free. Behind the leader came 6 other Vorthak, each slightly smaller but equally intimidating. They moved with perfect coordination, their steps synchronized as if they were all part of the same organism, which, Jiho realized, they probably were. "Suyeon, open the external communication system," Jiho said. "Let's welcome our guests." His voice echoed across the colony grounds through the loudspeakers. "Welcome to Hanbit Industries Kepler 442C Division. I'm Jiho Park, and I'll be your host for today's meeting. If you'll follow the lighted path, we've prepared a conference room where we can discuss our potential partnership in comfort." The Vorthak leader tilted its head in what might have been confusion. After a moment, it began walking toward the administration building, followed by its companions. Their movements were fluid and silent, but Jiho noticed something interesting. They were looking around with what appeared to be curiosity rather than the cold assessment he had expected. Jiho met them at the entrance to the building, flanked by Nari and Dongyun. He had dressed in his best business suit, the one he usually saved for visits from corporate executives. The effect was probably lost on the aliens, but it made him feel more confident. "Welcome," he said, extending his hand before remembering that the gesture might not translate. "I'm Jiho Park, Chief Operations Officer. Thank you for accepting our invitation to meet." The Vorthak leader studied him for a long moment. When it spoke, its voice was the same mechanical unison they had heard over the radio, but quieter and somehow more personal. "I am Prime Assimilator Kethron of the Vorthak Collective. We have come to bring your species into unity with our great purpose. Your response to our arrival was unexpected. I imagine it was. Please come inside. We've prepared refreshments, though I'm not sure what your dietary requirements are. Kethron followed Jiho into the conference room, where Su-Yan had set up her laptop and a large screen for the presentation. The other Vorthak arranged themselves around the table with mechanical precision, but Jiho noticed that they kept glancing around the room as if they had never seen anything like it. Before we begin, Jiho said, settling into his chair at the head of the table, I'd like to understand your organization's goals and methods. In my experience, the best partnerships are built on mutual understanding. Partnership? Kethron repeated the word as if it were foreign. We do not form partnerships. We assimilate. We add the biological and technological distinctiveness of other species to our collective. They become part of us, and we become stronger. I see. And how has that worked out for you in terms of efficiency and productivity? The question seemed to catch the Vorthak off guard. Kethron was quiet for a moment before responding. Efficiency and productivity? Well, yes. Running an organization as large as yours must require enormous resources: personnel costs, equipment maintenance, transportation, communication systems. How do you measure the return on investment for your assimilation operations? Nari stepped forward with a tablet in her hands. If you don't mind me asking, what's the average cost of assimilating a new species, including the military campaign, the conversion process, and the integration into your collective? Kethron looked at the other Vorthak, and for the first time, Jiho saw something that might have been uncertainty in those black eyes. We do not measure such things. The collective grows stronger. That is sufficient. But surely you track some kind of metrics, Su-Yan added. How do you know if one assimilation campaign is more successful than another? How do you allocate resources between different operations? The collective decides. All voices speak as one. Jiho leaned forward. All voices? How many individuals are part of your collective? Approximately 4 billion beings across 732 worlds. Nari nearly dropped her tablet. 4 billion? And they all participate in every decision? The collective mind processes all input and determines the optimal course of action. That must take a while, Jiho observed. How long does it typically take to make a major decision with that many participants? Kethron hesitated. Time is not a concern for the collective, but Jiho caught the hesitation. Actually, let me ask a different question. When did your collective last make a significant innovation? A new technology, a better process, an improved strategy? The silence stretched on for nearly a minute. Finally, Kethron spoke. Innovation comes through assimilation. We acquire the knowledge of others. But what about original innovation? New ideas that come from within your organization? The collective has all necessary knowledge. Nari and Jiho exchanged glances. They were beginning to see a pattern. May I show you something? Jiho asked, gesturing to the screen where Su-Yan was preparing the presentation. This is a breakdown of our operation here on Kepler 442c. The screen lit up with charts and graphs showing the mining colony's performance over the past 3 years. Production rates, efficiency improvements, cost reductions, and profit margins were all displayed in colorful, easy-to-read formats. As you can see, we've increased our output by 37% over the past year, while reducing our operational costs by 15%. This was achieved through individual initiative from our employees, competitive incentives, and decentralized decision-making. Decentralized decision-making. Kethron asked. Each department operates semi-independently, Nari explained. The mining teams make their own tactical decisions about where and how to dig. The maintenance crews set their own schedules based on equipment needs. The communications team handles all external relations without constant supervision from management. But how do you maintain unity of purpose? Through shared goals and profit sharing, Jiho replied. Everyone benefits when the operation succeeds, so everyone is motivated to do their best work, and when someone has a good idea, they're free to implement it without waiting for approval from 4 billion other people. Suyan clicked to the next slide, which showed individual performance metrics for key employees. For example, last month, one of our junior engineers suggested a modification to our extraction process that increased efficiency by 8%. She implemented the change immediately and received a bonus based on the increased profits. One individual made this decision? That's right. And because she benefits directly from the improved performance, she's motivated to find even better solutions. Kethron stared at the screen for a long time. Around the table, the other Vorthak were also studying the data with obvious interest. Jiho noticed that they were no longer moving in perfect synchronization. Some were leaning forward to get a better look at the charts, while others were sitting back and apparently thinking. This is inefficient, Kethron said finally. Individual decision-making leads to chaos and conflict. Sometimes, Jiho agreed, but it also leads to innovation, flexibility, and rapid adaptation to changing conditions. When was the last time your collective had to deal with an unexpected situation? All situations are considered and planned for. What about this situation? Did you plan for a human settlement to treat your arrival as a business opportunity? Another long silence. You did not respond as expected, Kethron admitted. Exactly. And that's because humans think differently from each other. We come up with new ideas, new solutions, new approaches to problems. That diversity of thought is what makes us valuable as partners, rather than just additional voices in your collective. Nari clicked to the next slide, which showed comparative data from other mining operations. Our colony consistently outperforms larger, more established operations because we encourage individual creativity and reward innovation. That's something you can't get from a hive mind. One of the other Vorthak spoke for the first time, its voice slightly different from Kethron's. The data suggests significant advantages to this decentralized approach. Kethron turned to look at its companion, and Jiho saw something remarkable. Surprise. The Prime Assimilator had not expected one of its subordinates to speak independently. Your input was not requested, Kethron said. But the analysis is correct, the other Vorthak replied. The efficiency gains shown here exceed anything achieved through recent assimilation campaigns. You will return to collective harmony, Kethron ordered, but there was uncertainty in its voice. I apologize, Jiho interjected, but I think we may have inadvertently demonstrated our point. Your colleague just provided valuable input that could help improve your organization's performance. In a human business structure, that kind of initiative would be rewarded, not discouraged. Kethron looked around the table at its companions, and Jiho realized that something fundamental had just changed. The perfect unity of the Vorthak was showing cracks. We will need to consider this information, Kethron said slowly. The collective must process these concepts. Of course, take all the time you need. But while you're considering, might I suggest a trial period? Let us continue our operation here as an independent contractor. You can observe our methods firsthand and measure the results against traditional assimilation. If we don't meet your expectations, You can always proceed with your original plan. A trial period? Think of it as due diligence. Any good business decision should be based on complete information. Kethron stood, and the other Vorthak followed suit, though not with their previous perfect synchronization. We will consider your proposal, the Prime Assimilator said. The collective will need time to process these new concepts. As the Vorthak filed out of the conference room, Jiho noticed that they were no longer moving as a single organism. Some walked faster than others, some paused to look at things that caught their interest, and the one who had spoken up earlier was actually lagging behind, apparently lost in thought. Well, Nari said once they were alone, that was either the best sales presentation of my career or the worst mistake in human history. Maybe both, Jiho replied, watching through the window as the Vorthak returned to their ship. But did you see what happened in there? They're starting to think as individuals? Is that good or bad? For us? It might be the only chance we have. 3 days had passed since the first meeting with the Vorthak, and the mining colony had settled into an uneasy routine. The alien ships remained on the crystalline plains, their dark hulls visible from every window in the settlement. Sometimes smaller craft would emerge and fly patrol patterns around the area, but the Vorthak had made no aggressive moves. Jiho stood in his office, looking out at the alien fleet while talking on the communication system with corporate headquarters, back on Earth. The conversation was not going well. You did what? The voice of Director Huang crackled through the speakers, the signal delayed by the vast distance between star systems. I offered them a business partnership, Jiho repeated. It seemed like the best option under the circumstances. The best option was to evacuate immediately. Do you have any idea what the board is going to say when they find out you're trying to negotiate with the Vorthak Collective? Probably that I saved 200 lives and a very profitable mining operation. Or that you've doomed us all. Jiho, these aren't rational beings you can make deals with. They're a hive mind that has conquered hundreds of worlds. I know what they are. But I also know they're interested in what we have to offer. They've been studying our operation for 3 days instead of just assimilating us. There was a long pause before Director Huang responded. Corporate is sending a team. They'll arrive in 6 days with full authority to handle the situation. What kind of team? The kind that cleans up messes. Try not to make things worse before they get there. The communication ended, leaving Jiho alone with his thoughts. He had expected corporate to be unhappy, but 6 days was a long time when dealing with aliens who could change their minds at any moment. A knock at his door interrupted his brooding. Nari entered, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression of barely controlled excitement. You need to see this, she said, handing him the tablet. I've been monitoring the Vorthak ships with our sensors, and something strange is happening. Jiho looked at the data streaming across the screen. It showed energy patterns and communication signals from the alien fleet, but the readings looked chaotic compared to the organized patterns they had observed before. What am I looking at? Internal communications. At first, all the ships were perfectly synchronized, like they were all connected to the same central processor. But look at this. She pointed to a section of the data where the patterns began to diverge. Instead of uniform signals, there were variations, delays, and what appeared to be competing transmissions. It's like they're arguing with each other, Nari continued. Or more accurately, like different parts of their collective are disagreeing about something. Disagreeing about what? I think about us, about whether to assimilate the colony or try this partnership idea. Before Jiho could respond, Suyan's voice came over the intercom. Jiho, we're getting a transmission from the Vorthak. They want another meeting. On their way. Actually, they're requesting that we come to their ship. Something about wanting to show us their operation. Jiho and Nari exchanged glances. Visiting a Vorthak ship was not exactly on anyone's list of safe activities. Tell them we'll be there. In an hour, Jiho said, and ask Dongyun to come with us. An hour later, Jiho, Nari, and Dongyun stood outside the largest Vorthak vessel. Up close, the ship was even more impressive and intimidating. Its hull seemed to pulse with organic life, and strange symbols glowed softly across its surface. The entrance that had dissolved to admit them revealed corridors that looked more grown than built. Kethron met them at the entrance, but something was different about the Prime Assimilator. Its movements seemed less coordinated, and when it spoke, its voice lacked the perfect unity they had heard before. "Welcome to our primary vessel," Kethron said. "We wish to show you how the collective operates so that you may better understand our concerns about your proposal." They followed the alien through corridors filled with other Vorthak, all moving with purpose but no longer in perfect synchronization. Some walked quickly, others slowly. Some paused to examine wall displays, while others ignored them completely. "Is everything all right?" Jiho asked. "Your people seem less organized than before." Kethron stopped walking and turned to face them. For the first time, Jiho could see what might have been exhaustion in those black eyes. "That is what we wish to discuss. Since our meeting 3 days ago, the collective has been divided." "Divided how?" "Some voices believe we should proceed with standard assimilation protocols. Others suggest that your partnership proposal has merit. Still others want to study your methods further before making any decision." Nari looked around at the Vorthak moving through the corridors. "How many voices are we talking about?" "All of them. 4 billion individuals, each with access to the data from your presentation, each forming their own analysis of the situation." 4 billion people trying to make the same decision at the same time? Dongyun asked. "That must be chaotic." "It is unprecedented. The collective has never experienced such widespread disagreement on a fundamental issue." They entered a large chamber filled with strange organic computers and display screens. Dozens of Vorthak worked at stations throughout the room, but their activities looked frantic rather than coordinated. "This is our central decision-making center," Kethron explained. "Normally, all voices speak in harmony, and decisions are reached quickly and efficiently. But observe." On the main display screen, Jiho could see what looked like a massive argument taking place in text form. Thousands of messages scrolled past every second, with different groups of Vorthak advocating for different courses of action. Assimilation Group. 7 argues for immediate action, one message read. Delay serves no purpose. Analysis Division. 12 disagrees, another responded. Human methods show measurable efficiency improvements. Economic Evaluation Unit requests more data on profit-sharing structures, added a third. "This is fascinating," Nari said, watching the debate unfold. "You've basically created the galaxy's largest committee meeting." Kethron made a sound that might have been a sigh. "It is inefficient. We have been debating for 72 hours with no resolution." "Maybe that's because you're trying to get 4 billion people to agree on something," Jiho suggested. "In human organizations, we use delegation. A smaller group of decision-makers reviews the data and makes choices on behalf of the larger organization. Delegation. You give authority to make specific decisions to individuals or small teams." They report back to the larger group, but they don't need unanimous approval for every choice. A new voice spoke from behind them. That would be highly irregular. They turned to see another Vorthak approaching, this one slightly smaller than Kethron, but moving with obvious confidence. "This is Sub-Assimilator Vrexith," Kethron said, "leader of the faction that supports immediate assimilation. The collective has operated successfully for thousands of years without delegation," Vrexith continued. "Unity of purpose requires unity of decision-making." "But what happens when unity becomes paralysis?" Nari asked. "How long can you afford to sit here debating while other opportunities pass you by?" "There are no other opportunities. We assimilate what we encounter." "That's not what your data shows," Jiho said, pulling out his tablet. "I've been analyzing the information you shared with us about your recent campaigns. Your assimilation rate has been declining for the past 50 years. Vrexith's black eyes focused on the tablet. "Declining how?" "Fewer successful assimilations per decade, longer campaigns, higher resource costs. It's like your organization is becoming less efficient over time." "The data is accurate," another voice said. This Vorthak was different from the others, smaller, and moving with quick, nervous energy. "I am Data Analysis Specialist Kethron. The efficiency decline is significant and accelerating." Kethron turned to stare at the newcomer. "You were not assigned to this discussion. I was analyzing the human presentation data when I observed the correlation with our historical performance metrics. The information seemed relevant. All information is processed by the collective. Individual analysis is unnecessary." "But the collective has been unable to reach a conclusion for 3 days," Kethron pointed out. "Individual analysis might provide clarity." Vrexith moved closer to the data specialist, and Jiho noticed that its posture had become aggressive. "You will return to your assigned function immediately." "My assigned function is data analysis. I am performing data analysis." "Your assigned function is collective data analysis, not individual interpretation." "What's the difference?" Nari asked. "Individual interpretation leads to individual opinions, which leads to disagreement and chaos," Vrexith replied. "But collective interpretation is taking 3 days to analyze a simple business proposal," Kethron countered. "Individual analysis could provide faster results. Faster is not always better. It is when opportunities are time-sensitive." Jiho watched the exchange with growing amazement. The Vorthak were arguing, not just debating through their collective network, but actually arguing face-to-face like individual beings. "Excuse me," he interjected, "but are you three making this decision independently of the collective?" All 3 Vorthak froze. Kethron spoke first. "We are representatives of different collective viewpoints. Representatives who are thinking and arguing independently? That is an oversimplification." "Is it? Because it looks to me like you've started forming individual opinions based on your personal analysis of the situation." Kethron tilted its head. "Personal analysis is an interesting concept. The data does seem clearer when I examine it without waiting for collective input." "That is dangerous thinking," Vrexith warned. "The collective exists to prevent individual error and bias. But it also prevents individual innovation and rapid decision-making," Kethron replied. Around the chamber, other Vorthak had stopped their work to listen to the conversation. Some moved closer, apparently drawn by curiosity. Others backed away, as if the ideas being discussed were somehow contagious. "May I make a suggestion?" Jiho asked. Why don't you try an experiment? Give Catherine authority to make a decision about our partnership proposal. Just as a test. If the decision is good, you can adopt similar delegation methods. If it's bad, you can return to collective decision-making. Absolutely not, Vrexith said immediately. Individual authority is contrary to everything the collective represents. But collective authority has failed to reach any decision at all, Catherine pointed out. Perhaps individual authority would be more efficient. Efficiency is not the only consideration. What other considerations are there? Vrexith paused, apparently thinking. Unity, purpose, shared identity. All of which can be maintained while still allowing for individual decision-making authority, Jiho said. That's how human organizations work. We have shared goals and values, but individuals are free to determine the best way to achieve those goals within their area of responsibility. Area of responsibility? Job descriptions, essentially. Each person has specific duties and the authority to make decisions related to those duties. Nari pulled out her tablet and showed them an organizational chart of the mining colony. Look, here's how our structure works. Jiho has overall authority for the operation, but I have specific authority for engineering decisions, Dongyun has authority for security issues, and Suyeon has authority for communications. Each individual operates independently within their assigned sphere, Catherine observed. This explains the rapid decision-making we observed in your colony. Exactly. And when we need to coordinate between departments, we have meetings to share information and make joint decisions. Like this meeting? Catherine asked. Like this meeting? The chamber had grown quiet as more Vorthak gathered to listen to the conversation. The debate on the main screen had slowed as well, with fewer messages appearing each second. This is contamination, Vrexith announced loudly. The humans are spreading individual thinking like a virus through the collective. Is that necessarily bad? Catherine asked. If individual thinking leads to better decisions and increased efficiency, perhaps contamination is beneficial. You have been compromised. Your ability to think collectively has been damaged. Or improved. I am able to process information faster and reach conclusions more quickly than the collective. This seems advantageous. You are becoming something other than Vorthak. Catherine considered this for a moment. Perhaps becoming something other than Vorthak is not a negative outcome. The silence that followed this statement was profound. Jiho realized they had just witnessed something unprecedented. A member of the Vorthak collective choosing individual identity over collective unity. And looking around the chamber, he could see the same realization dawning on dozens of other alien faces. The perfect unity of the Vorthak was fracturing, and human corporate culture was the cause. I think, Jiho said quietly, we need to have a much longer conversation about organizational structure. Catherine nodded slowly. Yes, I believe we do. 2 weeks had passed since the Vorthak collective began its transformation, and the situation had spiraled far beyond anything Jiho could have imagined. What started as a simple business negotiation had become the catalyst for the largest organizational restructuring in galactic history. Jiho stood in the newly established Human Vorthak Cooperation Center, a hastily converted warehouse that now served as headquarters for the strangest partnership in known space. Around him, humans and Vorthak worked side by side at temporary desks, creating what could only be described as the galaxy's first interspecies corporation. Catherine, who had appointed itself as Chief Data Analysis Officer, approached with a tablet full of reports. The former collective member now wore what appeared to be a business suit adapted for its alien physiology, complete with a name tag that read QRIN Data Division. The latest productivity reports from Sector 7, Catherine said, handing Jiho the tablet. Efficiency has increased by 43% since we implemented departmental autonomy. Any problems with the transition? Some resistance from traditional collective voices, but the results speak for themselves. Individual initiative is proving highly effective. Across the room, Nari was conducting what she called management. Training 101 for a group of former Vorthak warriors who had decided to form their own department. They sat in a circle, their imposing forms looking oddly domestic as they took notes on concepts like quarterly goals and performance metrics. Remember, Nari was saying, competition between departments should be healthy, not destructive. You want to outperform Security Division, but you still need to cooperate with them on joint projects. One of the warriors, who had chosen the name Rex for ease of pronunciation, raised a hand. What if Security Division fails to meet their targets? Do we assimilate them? No, Rex. In a corporation, you don't assimilate underperforming departments. You provide additional training and support to help them improve. That seems inefficient. Actually, it's more efficient in the long run because it maintains institutional knowledge and keeps experienced workers. Dongyun walked over to Jiho, shaking his head in amazement. I never thought I'd see the day when I'd be teaching alien warriors about employee benefits packages. How's that going? Better than expected. They're very interested in the concept of paid vacation time. Apparently, the collective never rested. That explains why they were getting less efficient over time. Burnout is a real problem in any organization. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Minho Yoon, the financial analyst who had come with the corporate team from Earth. He looked frazzled, carrying an armload of reports and wearing the expression of someone who had been working, with numbers that didn't make sense. Jiho, we have a problem, Minho said, dumping the reports on the nearest desk. A big problem. What kind of problem? The Galactic Corporate Consortium kind of problem. They've noticed what's happening here, and they're not happy about it. Jiho felt his stomach drop. The Galactic Corporate Consortium was the closest thing to a galactic government that existed, a loose alliance of the most powerful alien corporations and empires. They controlled trade routes, set interspecies regulations, and generally maintained the economic order of known space. How not happy are we talking about? They've issued a formal complaint about unauthorized organizational restructuring of a member species and dangerous contamination of established collective entities. They're demanding that the Vorthak return to their original collective structure immediately. Or what? Or they'll send the Krell Syndicate to enforce compliance. The room went quiet as everyone within earshot heard the name. The Krell Syndicate was the consortium's enforcement arm, a group of professional military contractors who specialized in dealing with problem organizations. They were efficient, ruthless, and had never failed to complete a mission. Yoonji Han, the legal counsel who had arrived with the corporate team, looked up from her own stack of documents. I've been reviewing the consortium's charter, and technically, they do have the authority to intervene if a member species undergoes what they consider an unauthorized transformation. But we haven't transformed, Catherine protested. We have simply reorganized our operational structure for improved efficiency. Try explaining that to beings who see any change in the status quo as a threat to their power, Yoonji replied. Kethron, who now carried the title of Executive Vice, President of Former Collective Operations, entered the center with several other high-ranking Vorthak. They moved with purpose, but no longer in perfect synchronization, each one displaying subtle individual characteristics in their posture and gait. "We have received a formal communication from the consortium," Cathron announced. "They demand our presence at an emergency hearing to explain our recent organizational changes." "When?" Jiho asked. 3 days. At the consortium headquarters on Station Nexus Prime. Taehyun Kang, the ambitious young executive who had been instrumental in developing the new Vorthak corporate structure, looked up from his workstation. "This could actually be an opportunity." "An opportunity for what?" Dongyun asked. "To present our case to the entire consortium, to show them that our new model is more profitable and efficient than the old collective system. Or to get us all vaporized by the Krell Syndicate," Minho muttered. "Not if we approach this correctly," Taehyun continued. "We need to treat this like the ultimate sales presentation. We're not just defending our right to exist, we're offering them a chance to improve their own organizations." Daeun Moon, the marketing specialist who had arrived with the latest corporate reinforcements, stood up with obvious excitement. "He's right. This isn't a trial. It's a product launch. We're introducing consortium leaders to the most revolutionary management system in galactic history. A management system that's currently being held together with duct tape and hope," Nari pointed out. "Every successful startup has growing pains," Daeun replied. "The important thing is to focus on the results." Woojin Shin, the data analyst who had been tracking the transformation's progress, pulled up a series of charts on the main display screen. "The results are actually impressive. Vorthak territories that have adopted our corporate model are showing increased productivity, reduced resource consumption, and improved worker satisfaction across the board." "Worker satisfaction?" Cathron asked. "It turns out that even former collective members prefer having individual identity and personal goals. Morale surveys show significant improvement since the transition." "You've been conducting morale surveys on the Vorthak?" Jiho asked. "Standard corporate practice," Wu Jin replied. "Happy employees are productive employees." Catherine tilted its head thoughtfully. "Happiness is an interesting concept. The collective never considered emotional states as relevant to productivity. That was probably another reason for your declining efficiency," Yesul Jung, the diplomatic liaison, observed as she joined the group. "Emotional well-being has a direct impact on work performance." "Fascinating. We should study this further. After we survive the consortium hearing," Jiho reminded everyone. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. The team worked around the clock to create the most comprehensive business presentation in galactic history. Every aspect of the IDAB Vorthak transformation was documented, analyzed, and packaged into a format that even the most conservative consortium members could understand. Charts showing productivity improvements, graphs demonstrating resource efficiency, cost-benefit, analysis comparing collective operations to corporate structures, case studies of successful departmental initiatives, employee satisfaction surveys, competitive analyses comparing the new Vorthak Corporation to traditional collective systems. "This is either going to be the greatest corporate presentation ever delivered," Daeun said, reviewing the final slides, "or the most elaborate suicide note in history." "I prefer to think of it as a hostile takeover," Taehyun replied. "We're not just defending ourselves. We're offering to help them restructure their entire organization. You want to convince the Galactic Corporate Consortium to adopt human business practices? Why not? If it works for the Vorthak, it can work for anyone." The day of the hearing arrived, and the human Vorthak delegation boarded a specially modified transport ship for the journey to Nexus Prime. The delegation included Jiho as Chief Executive Officer, Kethron as Executive Vice President, Catherine as Chief Data Officer, and representatives from each of the major departments that had formed within the new Vorthak Corporation. Nexus Prime was a massive space station at the center of known space, serving as the headquarters for the Galactic Corporate Consortium. Its gleaming halls and conference chambers hosted the most important business meetings in the galaxy, where decisions affecting trillions of beings were made daily. The consortium board consisted of representatives from 12 of the most powerful species in known space. The insectoid Zeltari, whose hive minds controlled vast manufacturing operations, the crystalline Korth, who monopolized energy production across 17 sectors, the machine intelligences of the Synthax Collective, who processed information for half the galaxy. And sitting at the head of the conference table, the ethereal cosmic elders, beings so ancient and powerful that some species worshipped them as gods. "The Vorthak Collective will explain their unauthorized transformation," announced the primary elder, its voice resonating through dimensions that human ears could barely perceive. Jiho stood, feeling the weight of every gaze in the room. Representatives of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy were watching him, waiting to hear why they shouldn't order the complete destruction of everything he had helped create. "Honored members of the consortium," he began, "we're not here to defend an unauthorized transformation. We're here to present the most significant advancement in organizational efficiency in galactic history." The main display screens lit up with the first slide of their presentation. Bold letters appeared. Symbiosis Solutions, Voluntary Cooperation for Sustainable Growth. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all classifications," Jiho continued, "allow me to introduce you to the future of galactic business." The silence in the room was absolute. Then, slowly, one of the Zeltari representatives leaned forward. "We are listening." And Jiho began the presentation that would either save the galaxy or destroy it. The presentation had been running for 2 hours, and Jiho could see the effect it was having on the consortium board members. What had started as skeptical attention was slowly transforming into something that looked suspiciously like interest. Sunwoo. Oh, the mergers and acquisition specialist who had joined the team for this crucial meeting was displaying a complex chart showing productivity comparisons across different organizational structures. The data was overwhelming in favor of the corporate model. "As you can see," Sunwoo explained, "collective-based organizations show declining efficiency over time, while corporate structures with individual accountability demonstrate sustained growth and innovation." One of the Korth representatives, a crystalline being whose body pulsed with soft blue light, spoke in a voice like wind chimes. "These numbers suggest significant advantages to your proposed system. However, implementation would require fundamental changes to our existing power structures." "That's exactly right," Chae Young-woo, the revolutionary economist, said as she stepped forward. "Traditional hierarchies create bottlenecks and suppress innovation. Democratic decision-making at the departmental level, combined with clear performance metrics, eliminates these problems." A representative from the Synthax Collective, its mechanical voice precise and emotionless, interjected. "Our analysis indicates potential risks in delegating decision-making authority to individual units. System failures could cascade through the organization. That's why we implement checks and balances," Min-Seok Kwon, the veteran negotiator, replied smoothly. "Independent departments with overlapping responsibilities create redundancy and prevent single points of failure." Kethron stood, its business suit somehow making the 8-foot alien appear professional rather than threatening. If I may provide a personal perspective, it said, the transformation of our collective has been difficult, but ultimately beneficial. Individual Vorthak now demonstrate creativity and initiative that was impossible under the old system. Personal. Perspective? The primary elder's voice carried a note of surprise. You speak as an individual rather than as part of your collective? I speak as both. I retain my connection to other Vorthak while also maintaining my individual identity. This dual perspective allows for better decision-making. Catherine activated another display, showing detailed case studies from various Vorthak territories. Our data indicates that departments operating under corporate principles consistently outperform traditional collective units by an average of 37%. These results are impressive, admitted one of the Zeltari representatives, its insectoid features clicking with what might have been thoughtfulness. However, our species has operated as a unified hive for millennia. Change would be challenging. All change is challenging, Jiho said. But the question is whether the benefits outweigh the costs. In this case, our analysis suggests they do by a significant margin. Daeun Moon activated the final set of slides, showing projections for galaxy-wide implementation of corporate principles. If even half the consortium members adopted these methods, we estimate a 40% increase in overall galactic productivity within 5 years. The room fell silent as the board members contemplated the implications. Finally, the primary elder spoke. These proposals are intriguing. However, they represent a fundamental challenge to the established order. Many species will resist such changes. That's why we're not proposing mandatory adoption, Taehyun said. We're suggesting a gradual transition with voluntary pilot programs and comprehensive support systems. A soft rollout, Daeun added, using corporate terminology that somehow sounded natural even in this cosmic context. We start with willing participants, demonstrate success, and let the results speak for themselves. One of the Synthax representatives processed this information for several seconds before responding. You are proposing to transform galactic civilization through market forces rather than regulatory mandate. Exactly. The best ideas succeed because they work, not because they're forced on people. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed, and a voice over the intercom announced, "Security alert! Krell Syndicate vessels approaching. All personnel prepare for emergency protocols." The board members looked at each other, with expressions ranging from concern to resignation. The primary elder's form flickered with what might have been annoyance. It appears the syndicate has decided to resolve this matter through traditional means, the elder said. Through the conference room's massive windows. Everyone could see the approaching Krell ships. They were sleek, dark vessels designed for one purpose: enforcement. Their reputation for efficiency was matched only by their reputation for ruthlessness. How many ships? Dong-Yun asked, his military training automatically assessing the threat. 12. Heavy cruisers and a command vessel, reported one of the station technicians. They're requesting immediate surrender of all Vorthak personnel for mandatory collective restoration. Collective restoration? Catherine asked. Forced reassimilation into the old hive mind structure, Catherine explained grimly. They intend to erase our individual identities. Jiho felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same feeling he had experienced when facing the original Vorthak invasion. Sometimes the most impossible situations required the most unconventional solutions. Suyon, open a communication channel to the Krell command ship, he said. Are you insane? Minho whispered. Those are professional killers, not potential business partners. Every organization has needs and goals, Jiho replied. We just need to figure out what theirs are. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the Krell command vessel. The Krell were humanoid, but larger, with pale gray skin and cold black eyes that seemed to evaluate everything in terms of threat assessment. Their leader, wearing elaborate military decorations, appeared on screen. I am War Commander Zektos of the Krell Syndicate, the alien announced. You will surrender the corrupted Vorthak immediately or face the consequences. War Commander Zektos, Jiho said, stepping forward. I'm Jiho Park, Chief Executive Officer of the Human Vorthak Corporate Alliance. Before we discuss surrender, I'd like to present you with a business opportunity. The Krell commander stared at him for a long moment. A business opportunity? The consortium hired you to restore the Vorthak to their original collective state, correct? But what if we could offer you a more profitable alternative? Explain. Chae-Young quickly pulled up a new presentation on the side screens. The Krell Syndicate operates as a military contractor, taking on enforcement jobs throughout the galaxy. But your current business model has limitations. What limitations? You can only take on one major contract at a time. You have high operational costs due to military equipment maintenance, and your growth potential is limited by the number of available conflicts. War Commander Zektos leaned forward slightly. Continue. What if instead of military enforcement you became a consulting firm specializing in organizational transformation? Help other species transition to corporate structures voluntarily, with much higher profit margins and much lower operational costs. You want us to become consultants? Think about it. Instead of destroying organizations, you'd be improving them. Instead of one-time military contracts, you'd have ongoing service agreements. Instead of making enemies, you'd be creating satisfied customers. Sunwoo stepped forward with financial projections. Our analysis suggests that corporate consulting could generate 3 times the revenue of military contracting with 60% lower costs. The Krell commander was quiet for a long moment, apparently considering the proposal. Finally, he spoke again. These projections assume successful market adoption of your corporate model. What evidence do you have that other species will voluntarily adopt these changes? As if on cue, several new voices spoke up from around the conference room. The Zeltari Hive would be interested in pilot programs, announced the insectoid representative. The Korth crystalline matrix sees potential benefits in departmental autonomy, added the energy being. The Synthax Collective requests detailed implementation protocols, said the machine intelligence. One by one, the consortium board members expressed interest in exploring the corporate model for their own organizations. What had started as a trial to determine the fate of the Vorthak had become a galaxy-wide business opportunity. War Commander Zektos looked around at the suddenly enthusiastic board members, then back at the humans on the screen. You have created a market for services that did not exist an hour ago, he observed. That's what good business development does, Jiho replied. It identifies unmet needs and creates solutions. And you believe the Krell Syndicate could profit from participating in this transformation? I believe you could lead it. Your organization already has the structure, discipline, and reputation needed to implement large-scale change. You just need to shift your focus from enforcement to improvement. The Krell commander was silent for several minutes, apparently consulting with his own staff. When he returned, there was something different in his expression. The Krell Syndicate will consider this proposal. However, we require a demonstration of the model's effectiveness before committing resources. What kind of demonstration? Help us restructure our own organization according to your corporate principles. If the results meet your projections, we will become your partners rather than your enemies. Jiho looked around at his team, seeing excitement and terror in equal measure on their faces. They had just convinced the galaxy's most feared military contractors to become management consultants. "We accept," Jiho said. "Welcome to the United Galactic Corporation." 6 months later, Jiho stood in his new office on the top floor of the UGC headquarters, looking out at a galaxy that had transformed beyond recognition. The Vorthak Corporation had become the model for dozens of other species, each finding their own way to balance collective goals with individual initiative. The Krell Consulting Group was booked solid for the next 3 years, helping traditional hierarchies transition to more flexible corporate structures. The Zeltari had discovered that individual creativity significantly improved their manufacturing processes. The Korth had learned that distributed decision-making actually made their energy networks more stable and efficient. Even the Cosmic Elders had adopted some corporate practices, though they preferred to call it optimized cosmic governance. Kethron entered the office carrying a quarterly report that showed record productivity across all UGC member organizations. "The numbers continue to exceed projections," the former Prime Assimilator said. "Universal adoption of corporate principles has increased galactic productivity by 43% while reducing resource consumption by 27%. Any problems?" "Minor adjustment issues as some species adapt to individual initiative. But overall, the transformation has been remarkably successful." Jiho nodded, then noticed a small notation at the bottom of the report. "What's this about a human resources development program? Several species have requested assistance in developing their own versions of human business culture. Apparently, our natural talent for bureaucracy and middle management is considered highly valuable. So we've gone from being a minor species to being the galaxy's business consultants?" "In essence, yes. Though I believe the correct corporate terminology would be market leaders in organizational development services." Jiho laughed, remembering the terrified mining colony workers who had started this whole transformation. Now those same workers were running training programs for alien executives across the galaxy. His desk communicator chimed with an incoming message. The display showed it was from Director Huang back on Earth. "Jiho, the board has reviewed your reports from the past 6 months. We have just one question. How exactly did you turn a near-death experience into the most profitable business venture in human history?" Jiho smiled as he composed his reply. "Simple corporate strategy, sir. We identified an unmet market need and developed a scalable solution to address it. And the market need was? Better management practices. Turns out the galaxy was full of organizations that needed help learning how to run efficient, profitable operations. We just happened to be the species best qualified to teach them." He sent the message and leaned back in his chair. Outside, his window, ships from a dozen different species, traveled the trade routes of the galaxy. Their crews trained in human business practices, and their operations optimized according to corporate principles that had been refined in boardrooms across Earth. The greatest human weapon hadn't been superior technology or military might. It had been something far more powerful and far more terrifying. The ability to turn any situation into a business opportunity, complete with proper documentation, performance metrics, and quarterly reviews. And somewhere in the galaxy, on a small mining colony on Kepler 442c, the original Handbit Industries operation continued its work, now serving as the flagship location for the UGC's Corporate Culture Development Center. After all, every successful business needed to remember its roots.